All right. Thank you so much, everyone. We've got a good group here logging into building a media brand with Zach Busekrus at Enrollify. Thank you so much, Zach, for joining us. Before we get started, I have just a couple of housekeeping items for participants. I know if this is not your first session that you've heard this before, but just to repeat, this is being recorded. All recorded links will be shared with participants and or attendees next week on our website. Please stay on mute and off camera to let Zach take the mic here. Feel free to post questions in the Whova app, and we will make sure to leave time at the end so that we can answer all of them. We will be monitoring the QA function in the Whova app during the session, so we can help you if you have any issues, or you can email us at marketing@carnegiehighered.com. So without further ado, I'll pass it on over to you, Zach.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all so much for your time. I know giving up 45 minutes to an hour is never easy, especially these days. But I just want to thank you guys for making the time for to really invest in yourself. I really hope that you get a lot from what I'm going to cover today. Now, I don't know about you all, but I find that sometimes you go to these conferences, right? Whether they're in person or whether they're virtual like this one, and the content is a little bit like fast food, right? It sort of tastes good in the moment. The salty goodness, you can kind of like feel it in your pores. It tastes delicious, and then and then you leave, right? You go back home. Maybe you're sitting on an airplane, or you're, in this case, opening up your email again, and you start to think to yourself, what was that valuable, right? Your stomach starts to churn a little bit, and you think, was that hour actually worth it? Did I actually learn anything? Um, my hope is that the content that we're going to walk through today, and ultimately the content that you'll get throughout this entire event, is much more like a steak dinner, right? So it's delicious and satiating in the moment, but more importantly, it gives you the fuel that you need to go back to your respective role, your respective jobs, with new ideas, a new vigor for the great work that you do, and quite frankly, the energy to keep going. No one goes to a professional development event of any kind hoping to leave that event and then go back and just do the same thing that they were doing before, right? The whole point of conferences like the one Carnegie's put on is to inspire you to have new ideas and to get excited to go back and do work a little bit differently. So I hope that we're able to do a little bit of that today. Just a little bit about me before we dive in here. I'm the founder of Enrollify. And for those of you who might not know Enrollify is where higher ed marketers come to learn new marketing skills, discover new products and services, and find their next job. We're probably best known for our podcast network. We have a pretty robust podcast network featuring hopefully some familiar faces in the industry who host shows on our network. But in addition to our podcast network, we've got a resource called Chatter, which is like a G2 crowd or a Capterra, but specifically for higher ed software providers and reviews on services agencies. And then we also have a jobs board. So if you're interested in looking for a new job and you want to do something marketing or admissions related and or adjacent to the industry, you can find those jobs on Enrollify Jobs. Ultimately, what we're trying to do with Enrollify is build a dynamic community that's truly helpful and provides you with the content that you need and the ideas that you need to do your work better. So that's ultimately what we're trying to build here at Enrollify. But enough about Enrollify, enough about me. I want to talk a little bit about our roadmap today. So I'm really pitching this idea, this concept of higher ed content marketing 3.0, because I think it's a very important time in the history of content marketing to step back, understand where we came from, but really understand how the incredible dynamic forces that are hitting us all in the market right now are affecting our work, and quite frankly are affecting the realities of our current students and also, of course, our prospective students. Next, I want to talk about how to leverage creator marketing for student recruitment. I believe that creator marketing is one of the most underutilized strategies for new student acquisition, but also for current student engagement. And I think that there's a lot of work that the industry needs to do to better understand what creator marketing actually is, how it actually works, and why it's so important to be implementing in the context of our overarching strategic plans. So we're going to talk about creator marketing today. And then also, we're going to talk about why I believe that now is the time for enrollment marketing teams to think like media brands and to start thinking about their marketing and communications and student recruitment efforts less as just kind of traditional promotions or traditional sort of like outbound and even more traditional inbound communications, and rather shift to realize that at your core you have the opportunity to build a media brand, and why I believe that that is actually the acquisition channel for new students of the future. So that's what we're going to cover today. But first, let's just kind of dive into what higher ed content marketing 3.0 really is. So, in order to do this effectively, I think we have to take a little bit of a trip down memory lane, and I want to go back to 2013. So this was me in 2013. Which, can you believe that was 10 years ago? Like 2013, it's been a decade since 2013, which is like mind-boggling, right? I was actually still in college. I was wrapping up my undergraduate career, and I got the opportunity to take a job at a small kind of like boutique marketing shop that focused on higher education marketing and student recruitment. That was like their niche. They were a team of 5 people. This organization is now one of the most respected agencies in the space, DD agency. At the time, they were direct development. And Tony Frega, the CEO, came to me and he asked me if I would help them build out a social media marketing and really like managed service that they could offer their clients. And in hindsight, I think that the only reason I was selected was because I was young. They assumed because I used social media, I knew how to build strategy and management packages around it. And then two, I was probably the most affordable option that at the time a small agency could have afforded. But if you remember what social media was like in 2013, right? This is when you still got reach on Facebook, right? Like organically, I should say. You could post something, you could post an invitation to subscribe to your newsletter, and you could get 40% of the people that like saw the post would actually go and convert and sign up for your newsletter. Organic social was thriving, right, in 2013. The idea of boosted posts was like just coming around. Anyhow, I was tasked with building this suite of services that the agency could sell to institutions. But I had no idea what I was doing, right? And so I did what any at the time 19-year-old would do, and I just spent a lot of time Googling, trying to figure out, okay, what is social media marketing as a service? What might this look like? How might we package it, etc. And I stumbled upon what I was convinced had to be the best think tank in this space. This organization called HubSpot. HubSpot would give so much content away for free. I remember downloading checklists and like sample packages that I could just edit on the fly. I got a degree, if you will, in social media marketing through their content, which was all free. And I'll never forget the day I got a phone call, and that phone call was from a HubSpot salesperson. And I remember in hindsight, I felt so stupid, but on the call, he asked me what platform we use for marketing automation. And I was like, I don't really even know what marketing automation is. I don't think anything. And he started talking to me about HubSpot. And I told him on the phone, I was like, I thought you guys were like a think tank that produced free content for social media like managers or something like that. And that really was like my first introduction to the power of content marketing. Now, I think that there are multiple eras of content marketing. So I think that this era that I've been describing just now with my little story around how I was introduced to HubSpot was the era of enlightenment, right? This like, yeah, and you could argue with me that content marketing has been around for forever, and since people were publishing any content, that was a form of marketing, and you would be technically right. But I think for our purposes from a contemporary perspective, content marketing 1.0 was this era of enlightenment, this idea that people just started realizing that you could create content that was helpful, and that could actually be a vehicle for acquisition of new customers, new students, etc. Then I think we moved into the era of expansion. And in large part, I think over the last year or so, we've been coming out of this era of expansion, but the era of expansion is what I'm calling content marketing 2.0. And this was the era where everyone became, a thought leader. And I'll unpack all of these in a little bit more detail in just a second. But I think where we're transitioning, and I would argue where we've been in since at least the start of 2023, is what I'm sort of dubbing the era of edutainment, with an emphasis on AI, right? And this is what I believe to be content marketing 3.0, or the third wave of content marketing. And I want to unpack, in large part today, what I think this wave actually looks like, and why I think it actually matters. But just a little bit more detail, so we're about the past, so we're all on the same page going into the future. So this era of enlightenment, right? Content marketing 1.0. This was the moment where people realized, if you create content that helps educate consumers, right, about the value prop of whatever it is your product that solves, uh, you'll help sell your product, right? You'll help sell your service. This idea that content can be used as an acquisition channel, an acquisition tool, was quite novel, right? So what did everybody do? Everybody started a blog, right? And everybody used Facebook to distribute that blog content, right? Facebook was the primary distribution platform, and hosting a blog, whether it was Blogger or WordPress, right? That's where folks posted their content. And then the era of expansion was this moment where we all realized, yep, people love content. People consume a lot of content. People are reading more and more content on their mobile devices. This was the era where people thought that everyone needed to be a thought leader. Like, every business all of a sudden overnight became a thought leader, and they also thought that you kind of had to be everywhere, right? I don't know if you guys remember going to conferences, right? 5 years ago, 6 years ago, right? And everyone was saying, you got to be on Tumblr, you got to be on Instagram, you got to be on Twitter, you got to be on Vine, you got to be on Google Plus, right? This idea that the future of distribution, the future of marketing, looked like being kind of everywhere, all the time, all at once. And this ended up birthing a bunch of social media management tools and publishing tools, where you could click a button and you could have, like, that same blog post, right, published across all of these networks. And when you think about how social works today and how social algorithms favor content today, that approach couldn't be farther from what works today, right? But just a few years ago, like, that's what worked. That's what people were doing. This idea of, we can't control where people are going to access information from, right? The networks that they're going to consume content in. Therefore, we have to be in all the ponds, right? That was the era of expansion. This era of edutainment that we are well into now, this third wave of content marketing, is an era where people expect content to find them, right? We all expect great content to find us, and we expect that content to keep our attention, right? So think about just your own behavior scrolling through Instagram Reels or TikTok, right? And how quickly you'll make a decision. You'll tell the algorithm very quickly whether or not this content is exciting to you, is valuable to you, is helpful to you, and whether or not it's entertaining to you. So in this era, for businesses, for institutions, for our purposes today, like, this is the era to leverage creators, right? This is the era to essentially use different individuals to help distribute our communications, our marketing, etc. And it's also the era where I believe, anyone who's at the front lines of your institution's brand, whether that be marketing communications professionals, whether that be folks who are working in student engagement, whether that's folks who are working in admissions and recruitment, I do believe that this is the era to build a personal brand. Because at the end of the day, people today, more so than ever before, buy from people more than they buy from institutions. People trust people more than they trust institutions. So this is the era of edutainment. And I think what this era looks like a little bit more, maybe practically or tangibly. First and foremost, it starts with video. You guys have heard about the importance for video at conferences for the last 5 years. Everyone's been talking about it, right? I think the era of edutainment, where video takes a little bit of maybe a different twist, is folks have spent a lot of time at conferences talking about how Gen Z in particular has, like, no attention span, and how the future of content is short form, and how millennials and Gen Z, they've got attention spans less than that of a goldfish of 8 seconds. Right? You guys have heard these stats done around. I couldn't agree less with those statements, and I actually believe that the data backs me up. Did you know that when it comes to YouTube, the most viral YouTube videos of all time have an average length, I should say, of 17 minutes? Okay, so people who are watching these viral videos, millions and millions, hundreds of millions of people, they're spending 17 minutes on average, right, watching these videos. Obviously, you've got short form content on TikTok and Instagram as well, and I'm not here to dish to sort of like negate the importance of short form content, but I am here to negate the fact that young people just have short attention spans. That's false. What's true is that the expectation for great content and the patience that people have for crappy content has dramatically changed, right? So younger generations have an incredible high standard for where they put their attention, right? Their expectations of content has to be great. I think maybe as you get a little bit older, people are maybe still a little bit patient. Like they'll wait 30 seconds for you to get to your point. No one from Gen Z will wait more than three, right? But that doesn't mean that long form content doesn't work. It just means that the expectations of that content have to be great. We're seeing tools emerge, obviously, like Bard and ChatGPT from OpenAI, and to ignore these tools as a marketing professional is a huge mistake, right? There's this saying kind of trending on social right now that AI is not going to take your job, but somebody that knows how to leverage AI will, and that is truth, right? If you're not experimenting with these tools, and if you're not thinking critically about how your own workflow can be improved by leveraging these tools, if your teams aren't regularly discussing this, quite frankly, you are going to be left behind. These aren't tools to be scared of. These are schools to get. These are tools to get excited about, right? And one of the things I like to tell folks is that what AI does, what generative AI does, is it solves the content quantity problem, right? For so many years, it's been so hard to keep up with the production of content, right? All of you who work in marketing communications and have worked in marketing communications for years, you know this, right? Terry Flannery, one of my friends and one of the most respected marketers in the space, talks a lot about how marketers used to just be seen as order takers, right? And gone are the days where marketing is just a production shop. And I actually think that generative AI helps make that actually possible, right? So it solves the quantity problem, because you can work with tools like ChatGPT to create 20 blog posts in a matter of 20 seconds, right? And then what you can do on the quality end is spend that time that you would have spent producing raw content in refining and editing and whatnot. We could talk all about this for hours, and I'd be happy to at a later point. But to ignore generative AI as a marketer right now is quite foolish. So I hope that that's a takeaway that we all bring home with us. Podcasting as a medium is absolutely a part of the era of edutainment, and a key sort of mechanism for disseminating information, disseminating learning, ultimately attracting right fit students. It's a totally underutilized strategy in higher ed. Higher ed doesn't spend nearly enough time thinking about what it would look like to create original series. Audio as an experience, video podcasts are all the rage right now as well. The long form discussions around topics that truly matter, people pay attention to, and younger people in particular pay a lot more attention to this than you might think. One of the things that I think is so powerful about podcasting is it actually helps sort of like democratize access to quality information. We're about to enter into an election cycle, right? And if you think about the history of elections, unless you are part of like elite circles or had access to sort of like the insider group, getting long form context around what a candidate actually thought about a topic, right? Understanding like the nuance that exists in their perspective was quite literally impossible, right? You made your judgment on someone based off of a 30-second clip that you saw on CNN, MSNBC, or Fox News, right? That is how most of America has had to make decisions about who to vote for, right? One of the most incredible things happening in podcasting right now is folks are having long form conversations. Like you can go and listen to like a 3-hour interview with a presidential candidate, for instance, right? And understand that, hey, maybe this individual says some things that are stupid sometimes, but maybe their policy actually makes sense. Like podcasting is helping equip the next generations with much more of a comprehensive picture on what someone thinks and why they think the things that they think. And we're going to see this medium holds a lot of power and a lot of weight, and I think we're going to see this only expand over time. And then lastly, the era of edutainment, right, is an era of personal brand building. People are going to build trust with people are going to build trust with creators more than they're going to build trust with your institution. So finding ways to leverage our current students, we've talked about student ambassadors for a long time in the industry. I think now is the time to think about our students, not just ambassadors, but actual creators, right? Owners of our marketing content. And I want to explain a little bit about how I see this all coming together in just a second. So why does any of this matter, right? Like maybe we're kind of 15, 20 minutes into this presentation and you're thinking to yourself, cool, why does this matter? Well, it matters because according to the Birding Glass Institute, they recently reported that the percentage of jobs requiring a college degree fell from 51% in 2017 to 42% in 2021. And according to Gallup, the percentage of US adults ages 18 to 29 who view college education as very important dropped from 77% to just 41% in 6 years. These are not new stats to any of you, but I put them here simply because we need to be honest and remind ourselves that higher ed has a little bit of a branding crisis right now, or as I would say, a huge branding crisis right now. Our value proposition has never been under more scrutiny, and I actually think that the era of edutainment can help shift perspectives. The era of edutainment can actually help folks get excited again about the value of education because it's going to favor content that is produced from creators. It's going to favor content that is high in quality, and it's going to favor content that's a little bit like longer form. So I'm very optimistic, but I think that in this era, the institutions that figure out how to best leverage this next wave of content marketing, those are the institutions that are going to be around tomorrow. And the ones that don't, right? Quite frankly, they just won't be. It's a harsh reality, but it's the truth. So I want to talk about creator marketing and how to leverage creators for student engagement because I believe that creator marketing is maybe one of the more tangible layers or foundational elements of content marketing 3.0. And it's actually something that I think is underutilized, but I think is something very practical that all of us tuning in today can implement in our own context. Just a little bit of context around creator marketing. So creators are niche edutainers with loyal followings. This is how Zach defines them. You can define them a zillion different ways, but essentially, I think the kind of creator that I'm talking about is really good at talking about a few things, right? They specialize in a particular niche, and their following is incredibly, incredibly loyal. Like people will donate to their Patreon accounts because they love the content that they create so much, right? YPulse estimates that there are more than 200 million creators worldwide. So this is not like a small number of individuals. And in fact, you guys have probably seen this stat before, but the last time I think it was Gallup did some survey of young people and asked them what they wanted to be when they grow up, right? A whopping 60% of them said they wanted to be YouTubers. It's just true that people want to be creators. People like the ability to share their unique perspective with the world in a meaningful way. What's really interesting from a marketing perspective is that in 2023 has kind of been all over the place with respect to kind of spend, right? And are we in a downturn? Are we not? Like, what's happening with the economy? It's been very confusing, right? But the one area of spend where you look at like the top brands and where they allocate resources that has not decreased is creator spend. So actually, the amount of money that brands are spending on creator marketing has increased in 2023 as other channels like paid search, or SEO strategies and whatnot have decreased, right? So all this is to say is some of the best and brightest in the world recognize the fact that leveraging these creator partnerships is absolutely essential for the goals of the business. Now, when we think about creator marketing, I think one of the big fears that folks have is like, well, I don't want to put my brand in the hands of like, a Kardashian, right? Or like an influencer, right? And I actually think that's the wrong way to think about creators, right? So you all, as the marketing professionals, you all as the folks who are the owners of the institutional brand, you play an incredible role here. I would argue that you are the architects, right, of the marketing strategy. It's your job to draft the blueprints. Okay, the house doesn't get built without the blueprints, right? But your creators, think about them as like your interior designers, your decorators, your landscapers. They are the people that make the place feel warm. They are the people that make the home feel exciting or Instagrammable, right? You're not doing that. You shouldn't be doing that. Let your creators do that. When it comes to creators, I want to be clear. I'm talking about creators as being a mix of your faculty, your staff, your students, your alumni, and then other maybe like external brand advocates or brand ambassadors. We're not just talking about super Mr. Beast or like major influencers. Okay, we're talking about people that do already have some innate investment in your brand. This is a little bit of a warmish take, maybe a hot take, depending on who you are. But I believe that 80 to 90% of your marketing content should be developed by creators. Okay, I think for a number of reasons. Admittedly, this percentage is skewed to be a little bit dramatic, guys. So don't freak out on me here. But I think the essence of the point is true, which is that uh, people you don't know you don't know what content to create that's going to work for the audience that you're trying to attract. That's you could spend a lot of time designing a campaign targeted at a particular segment of students, right? That you think that you know, right? That market research told you responded in this particular way. And maybe the campaign would be okay. You are way better off saving way a ton of time and a lot of resources if you can find creators that know how to speak to that segment in a way that, quite frankly, you just can't. So I really believe when it comes to creating marketing content, actual creators should be the individuals creating the content. You should guide strategy, but actual asset creation should happen from creators. This is absolutely a hot take, but I believe that actually, like most institutions, would be better off firing their marketing agencies and allocating that budget to creator marketing campaigns. It's a tough thing to hear, and I've spent the last many years working at a marketing agency, and I'm a marketing consultant and whatnot. But the reality of the situation is, I do believe that most content that is created for the purpose of new student acquisition and even student engagement should be created by creators. Now, when we talk about creators, again, people define them in so many different ways. So here's what I think they mean for the purposes of our discussion today and for the purposes of your respective roles. I'd argue that there are three types of creators. There's the originators, right? People that create content themselves. There's the facilitators, who are people that, they have a platform where ideas are discussed. So think of the facilitators as like a podcast host, right? And then there's the experts, right? Industry and domain verified experts. Think about these experts as like your faculty, right? So when it comes to creator marketing and creator management, I believe that essentially like the role that is needed here, right, is what I'm calling the strategic content engineer, right? Somebody that understands enough about how to manage creator marketing, how creators function, but then also has a really high level understanding of like where the institution as a whole is trying to go, right? And what matters to the institution as a brand. And I think that this role, which could be played by, this could be a whole team. You could have a team of strategic content engineers. I think we're going to see these folks emerge in marketing and communications, also in admissions roles in higher ed, very, very soon. So here's kind of an example of how I think you could map out a creator marketing campaign in your context, or a little bit more tangibly what this all looks like. First and foremost, right, every marketing campaign has to have a goal. So you set an enrollment goal. Maybe it's to increase applications to business master programs from women ages 25 to 45 by 25%. Like that's your core objective. That's your goal, right? What do you do next? You determine a campaign architecture, right? You establish the constraints. So when you're thinking about working with creators, it's really important to establish constraints. What can you not say? What can you not do? Craft what I call chief positioning statements for the creator. So help give them, some broad enough terms that they can still kind of like, make their own, but help give them guidelines for, hey, this is the sentiment that we want to give off. These are these specific words that we want to make sure that you find a way to splice into whatever content that you're creating. And then, of course, determine a primary CTA, a primary call to action. Next, select a content engineer. So, work with your content engineer to determine, hey, how many originators, facilitators, and experts do you think that we need for this campaign? So again, the goal is to increase applications to this subset of programs by women ages 25 to 45. Who do we need to get involved here? Are there podcasts that we want people to go on? Do any of our faculty, have they written anything, particularly interesting or smart, right, recently that we could leverage here? Next, determine the creator pool. So, who do you want to work with? Think about your current students, your faculty, your staff. Look at their audiences. I promise you that every single one of you who are tuning into this, you have a student with a massive following, at least one, probably dozens, quite possibly hundreds of students with huge followings on social media, right? What does it look like to go and find them and figure out, okay, hey, how do we run a campaign that aligns with what this creator is known for, what they're good about, what kind of content they're great at creating, but that also helps us achieve our objective. And I'm not just talking about people that do makeup tutorials. There are people that live and go to school on your campuses that have huge podcast followings, and you've never met them. It's time to meet them. Okay. Then you want to review the developed content. So all the content that you get back from your creators, make sure that there's a good diversity of content. You want short form content. You want long form content. You want content that you can throw up on YouTube Shorts, which is a huge channel of awareness that is totally undertapped in higher ed. But then you also want longer form content, right? Long form podcast interviews that you could repurpose into smaller bite-sized pieces of content. Then you want to distribute that content, right? So once the creators have created the content, it's been vetted by you make sure it aligns with your overarching strategic marketing plan. Well, then how are you going to get it out, right? How are you going to distribute that? And maybe this is, the point where you go and partner with external brand advocates to promote that content. And then set a measurement strategy, right? Like you have to measure, I would argue that you have to measure at the campaign strategy level, not the creator level, simply because most of us don't have the resources to track every individual campaign that we might be running with every individual creator. So in the aggregate, right, assess whether or not this creator campaign for this particular audience worked or not. That would be my recommendation for getting started. And then again, make sure that you have true KPIs and you know how to measure whether or not this was effective. And then finally, review, remix, and reboot, right? Once all the content comes in, once the campaign is done, figure out what can we do differently next time, how do we adjust, etc. This was, too detailed for some of you and not detailed enough for others, but I wanted to offer this as just an example of how to kind of think through and get started with your first creator campaign, especially if you've never run one. Now, in terms of kind of the org structure of content marketing 3.0, I believe that this is like a mix of people and agents, right? So people using and leveraging generative AI tools. I've already talked about this strategic content engineer. And I think you have somebody like a producer and then like a promoter, right? Obviously, this will scale up and down depending on the size of your team and quite frankly, the responsibilities that are on your team. But I think the big takeaway here is this line here, the creator line, the creator grouping of people is not a group of people that we're used to thinking about as part of the marketing function of our respective colleges and universities. And I think that it is time to change that, right? Your creators, your originators, your facilitators, your experts, they are part of your marketing organization. You need to leverage them appropriately. And if you don't have people that you've identified that fit into those creator buckets already, the first thing that you should do after we log off today is go and start conversations to try to identify who these people might be that exist on your campus and that again have a good relationship with your institution's value proposition, even if they're not an actual stakeholder of that institution. So I want to talk, finally, as we kind of wrap some of these ideas up a little bit, and then we'll open up for questions in about 7-8 minutes here. I want to kind of end by talking about why I believe that enrollment marketing teams need to build media brands. So we've talked a lot about sort of the state of content, right? Where attention is going, why attention is going there. We've talked about the role that I believe creators play in kind of the future of content marketing and the future of higher education marketing and student recruitment. But I think perhaps the foundation that sits underneath all of this is this idea that brands today, all brands are trying to become media companies, or at least take a media first framework to how they think about sales and marketing in their respective organizations. Here's why I think this matters for higher ed and how we might get started here. So a little bit of context, right? What does this really mean and why are people doing it? There's a lot of folks that are moving away from, what my friend Jenny Petty and others, Jenny Petty's CMO at University of Montana, she'll say that, she'll call Facebook and these social platforms like rented land, right? This idea that when you post content on Facebook, you don't control who it actually goes to. You can't dictate that it goes to, first of all, if you post organically, only 1% of the people following you are even going to see it, right? But you can't choose who that 1% that sees it is, right? It's rented land versus owned channels like texting or email. You can't control whether or not somebody opens the email, but you can make sure that they received the email, right? You can make sure that they received the text. You are in control of that. So we're seeing brands shift away, time and resources and budget towards from owned channels into, excuse me, from rented channels into more owned channels. But the most sophisticated players are buying attention, they're buying content, and they're buying distribution. So as an example, right, HubSpot, I talked about them earlier. They recently bought The Hustle, which is a media company. It's a podcast network. It's a bunch of news. It's a daily newsletter, right? Stripe, huge payment processor, right? They bought Indie Hackers, which is a very robust network of entrepreneurs that start like bootstrapped businesses, right? SEMrush, formerly SEMrush, they bought Backlinko. SEMrush is a huge SEO software provider. They bought this incredible resource, this community hub, this library of content for people that care about SEO. So this idea of brands building and or buying content assets as a way to own distribution is just increasing in popularity. So what do I think that this means for us, right? I've developed this like little framework that is, you can tell me if it's helpful or not. I'm still working on it to be totally candid, but I'm calling it SABA for temporarily, and it stands for search, acquire, build, or amplify. So first and foremost, if you and your team are thinking about, hey, how could we look at our office? How could we look at our department as more of a media brand and less of just a production shop, right? Or more of a media brand and less of like a traditional outbound communications channel. Think about first and foremost, what does it look like to find content and brands that align with your strategic areas of focus. So maybe you represent a specific subset of programs or majors. Where are the people that want to go and enroll in graduate offerings and or want to go and enroll in undergraduate offerings that are interested in those topics? Like, where do they hang out? Where do they spend their time online? Go find the people that they listen to, right? Acquire, niche podcasts, YouTube channels, right? Email newsletters, TikTok accounts. I think that this might sound crazy. I think that there's a huge opportunity for higher ed to acquire content, right? To acquire creators, to actually go and like buy YouTube accounts. Like, sounds crazy. I'm going to show you it's been done before, right? And I actually think we're going to see even more of this because the value of audience has never been greater. Build, right? What does it look like to build new edutainment offerings around your chief faculty members, right? Think about your progressive areas of research, right? What could you do to disseminate that content and package it in a more entertaining way? What if you had like a daily TikTok series? What if you partnered with a podcast host that hosts content on biomedical engineering and brings the most sophisticated thought leaders on the world? What if you partnered with them to do an exclusive like 3-part series that interviewed your faculty members that are specialized in that field? These are the kinds of things that we have to be thinking about today. And these are, I think, where the lines between like PR and marketing and communications and quite frankly, enrollment management are continuing to merge. What's at the core is that everyone's after attention. Attention has never been more valuable and it's never been scarcer at the same time. And then finally, amplify. So what does it look like to think about leveraging content that you do have? What does it look like to think about leveraging content that you might purchase, acquire, and or create yourself in a very strategic focus so that you can grow your market share around that particular audience segment? Now, again, before you think I'm just totally crazy, here are actually like some content and community acquisitions that have happened in higher education. So in 2019, NYU actually acquired the publication and online platform called Washington Square News. It was an independently run student newspaper before, but they acquired it to help, quite frankly, like increase, I think, their index pages on Google, but also just sort of increase the influence that they had to disseminate content that they wanted, that they knew a target audience of theirs followed. In 2012, UC Berkeley acquired the publishing house Heyday Books, right? And Heyday Books primarily focused on publishing content around California history and culture and natural resources, which was a strategic focus of the institution at the time. They wanted to develop more programming, more offerings around that niche focus. So they bought a publishing house, right? And then in 2018, UT Austin, they actually launched a podcast in partnership with NPR called The Drag. And the whole concept here was they wanted to increase their market share in a particular area. They wanted to increase attention grab in a particular area. It aligned with something the NPR wanted to do, and they partnered together to make this podcast work, right? So it's been done, guys. It's not crazy. It's different, but hey, last time I checked, different is what works when it comes to marketing. Thinking outside of the box is what it works when it comes to marketing, right? So when building a media brand, if you want to reframe how you think about your work, how you think about your team's work, as like, hey, everything that we're doing is in the context of trying to capture attention share, more attention share, which is exactly what every media brand in the world is trying to do, right? And not just attention share from prospective students, but current students, alum, faculty, other stakeholders, etc. Here are some important questions I think you should ask. One, if Netflix were to create a documentary about one of our programs, which would it be and why? What is the program? What is the strategic area of focus? That comes to mind when you hear this question. That's where you want to start. That's where you want to start creating content around. Don't start where you're weakest. People do that, right? And there's pressure from faculty to do that, and I get it. But like, if you want to build a media brand and you're starting from scratch, you got to start from a position of strength. Number two, who are the faculty that you would immediately pick to be interviewed if Joe Rogan or the New York Times or Tucker Carlson came calling? Okay, I got a diverse set of individuals there intentionally, right? Who is it that you would want to put right in the seat across from Joe Rogan for a 3-hour podcast interview, right? When it comes to the creators that we want to tap into, those are your experts. Those are the people that you want to start building content around. Number three, what should we be wildly famous for that we're not, right? What is so great and so unique about your offerings that people don't know enough about, right? And not that you have small class sizes and like a great faculty to student ratio, and not that you have this state of the art like gym. Like, those things are table stakes. Dig a layer deeper. Are there any niche content entities that we might acquire or partner with, right? Go and do a little bit of digging. Go and find niche podcasts and say, hey, like, what would it look like to run a campaign with this niche podcast that spends a lot of time talking about the future of being an artist in the era of AI or something like that, right? Like, what does it look like to get creative? Podcasters, creators are hungry. Like, they are true artists. They're hungry. They create great work, but oftentimes they don't have great monetization strategies. So partnering with these folks can actually be quite beneficial, right? Audiences might be small than you're used to getting on Google search campaign, but as they say, niches get riches, and I really think that there's something to be said for niche audiences. And then finally, how could we build a regionally recognized collection of content assets that our core personas would automatically tune into out of sheer curiosity? So that's cumbersome, but essentially what I'm trying to get at is, what does it look like to build content that your people, your prospective students, your current students, whoever you're trying to attract, right, that they would watch, even if it has nothing to do with your core value add, right? Use that content to help build a content strategy that does align with your core value add. Most of the time, people create really boring 4-minute like program overview videos, and they're dramatic, and like the student's quote is like kind of lame, and that's what they ship. That's what they ship out to prospective students, right? It's time to stop doing that and be honest about the kind of content that works and why it works, and build content in alignment with those frameworks. A great example here, by the way, is what Northwestern Medicine has done. So they actually have built a whole podcast network. So they have a mix of faculty and student hosts. The people that are on these pods, right, they're Northwestern employees plus other highly regarded practitioners. They're not totally public with their numbers, but from what I've been able to gather from some relatively reliable sources, they get about 5 to 10 million downloads across the network per year. Okay. Now, this is remarkable, and again, I think they have like 10 shows maybe in total. But what was super cool about this, if you just go Google it, you can read about their case studies and stuff, is that people, what's ended up happening with this network is it's become a huge tool for recruitment, for alumni engagement, for reputational development, even at the highest of levels. It's not that they maybe needed a lot of help from a brand perception standpoint, but it's definitely elevated their perception, and it's become a huge tool and a vehicle through which people find out about many of their niche programs that otherwise were a little bit buried. So here's a little bit more of a tangible example of an institution that I think is doing the work here to build to build a media empire. So as we kind of close out here, guys, I want to just take a step back. I know I threw a ton at you, and I talk fast and I get excited, so I apologize for that. But taking maybe 3 steps back, higher ed, one of the coolest things about this industry is we have a monopoly on innovation content and distribution, right? Or at least we used to. Higher ed's progressive. Higher ed is where new ideas are born, right? Higher ed was like Silicon Valley before Silicon Valley was a thing, right? And I think the problem is that we, for lots of reasons, we've been caught up in like bureaucracy, and as policy has shifted, there are certainly a lot of external factors. But when you think about the root of our value prop to the world, quite frankly, it's a beautiful value prop, right? So I think higher ed needs to become leaders, not laggers, when it comes to leveraging media as a recruitment and fundraising tool. And I think that the organizations that figure out how to do this well are going to be huge champions for the entire industry. I really believe that rebuilding the brand equity of higher education is going to take time, but I think that the institutions that get serious about this era of edutainment that we're in, they will reap the harvest once the value of a degree is once again perceived as fundamentally crucial to success, which I believe will happen. So that's pretty much all I have for you guys right now. I think we have about 10 minutes for questions and whatnot. Again, thank you so much for your patience. Again, talk fast, but hopefully you're able to learn something or walk away with at least one tangible or idea or a little bit of motivation as you go back to your respective jobs and continue to do the very important work that you all do.
Awesome. And we do have a couple of questions that came through that I pinned at the top here. So I'm happy to walk through those. While we are answering those questions, feel free to submit more through the Whova app or here in the chat function of Zoom. So the first one, it was submitted before you shared some examples, but if there are any other additional examples, somebody asked about a brand or institution that's doing creator marketing well. You mentioned NYU, University of California, Berkeley, University of Texas at Austin, and then most recently you mentioned Northwestern Medicine. And as a follow-up to that, do you have any recommendations for how to find students with large followings for institutions?
Yeah, great questions. For any of you who are not already using Zemi, I would highly recommend using Zemi for a variety of purposes. But I think one of the things that's been really cool about Zemi, and I think how some schools are leveraging it, is they're actually using it as a way to identify folks with larger social followings, because a lot of the time your Zemi account can be connected to your Instagram account or your TikTok account or whatever it is. So I would start there, and the cool thing about starting with a Zemi community is that you know that the students that you're looking at are either interested in your organization, they've applied already, and or they're admitted. So it's just it's a relatively easy way to get a sense for that. Otherwise, what I would do is literally just like, and I was talking to a school the other day that's testing this out, send an email out and basically hold auditions, almost like creator auditions. Say, hey, we're going to spend $10,000 on a creator marketing campaign next month, and we're looking for folks who are excited to create content that have a minimum of X number of followers or whatever it is, and apply, right? People will love that. That is like a very easy strategy to implement, and it's something that I think any one of you could do literally like tomorrow without a bunch of legwork. My experience working with creators is that if you make it known that you're interested in working with them, they'll raise your hand and they'll come and want to work with you. So hopefully that helps. In terms of other examples too, I would go look at Purdue. I feel like gets a lot of press all the time, and I hate to use them as an example, even though I think Ethan Braden there is a friend. He's doing incredible work, but I do think Purdue's done a ton of work, especially on the podcasting front. If you want a really good example of like student run podcasts and how their podcast is, I think it trends regularly in like the top 100 podcasts. Theirs would be a good one to check out as well.
Awesome, thanks. A follow-up question to that is, we received, are these creators paid like brand influencers are? I know you just dropped kind of the reference to $10,000, but how would that, or how does that work to your knowledge when they're faculty, staff, or current students?
This is Zach's kind of hot take, but I fundamentally believe that anyone that's going to be involved in the promotion of an offering that you're going to get paid for, your institution's going to get paid for, if it goes well, should absolutely be compensated, right? So yes, you should be paying these creators. Now, I think you can get creative of like what payment looks like. I think it could be in the form of gift cards. It could be in the form of like, hey, maybe it's a paid internship, right? You work with someone for a semester or something like that, or a cohort for a semester, and maybe even they get a little bit of credit, like as opposed to getting compensated directly. So I think you can get creative about compensation, but I think if you want something that actually is going to work, you should be willing to pay for it. And with respect to rates, by the way, there is no standard. There is no industry standard. So don't let anyone tell you that there is an industry standard. Creators that are doing it well, they might personally be like, hey, like my audience is 500,000 people. This is what I charge, and you should trust them. But in terms of like, if you want like benchmark information on like leveraging student creators or faculty creators for this kind of work, unfortunately, it doesn't exist. This is something that we're working on at Enrollify to try to like standardize this, but nothing exists currently.
Awesome. Thanks, Zach. Two more questions that have come in. What would you say the role of thought leadership is today?
Eh, gosh, that's a loaded question. I think that the term is outdated. To be frank, I think it carries connotations that that just don't matter as much as maybe they used to. I think a better way of thinking about uh, somebody who creates content that is thought provoking on a particular topic in the context of a particular industry, right? I think the role is you need to make content accessible, and I don't necessarily mean it needs to be easy for everybody to understand, but it needs to be really easy and regular for your core constituent to understand. And so I think we've graduated from a term from an era where thought leadership was seen as something elitist, right? And if you think about thought leadership pieces, they're filled with jargon and they're filled with like vocabulary that your average person just doesn't understand. That era is like done, right? The era where of content creation that people actually respect today are folks that can speak in a very clear, a very genuine, and a very helpful way. And so, what I would argue, and this is actually one of the things that's hardest when working with faculty, is trying to get them to, for lack of a better term, like dumb down their content, right? Like it's so difficult, but if you can do it, and the people that are doing it well are seeing massive, massive success. So I'd say like the role of thought leaders today are how do you distill information that's important as succinctly as possible to that core target audience, right? And how do you make them feel like they actually got smarter by reading something that you wrote or watching something that you produced?
Thanks, Zach. Last question that we have right now is what's the best way to capture the attention in an email to a prospective student, 17 or 18? Of course, Carnegie has some thoughts on this, including personalized subject lines and cleaning up your pre-header and emojis and whatnot. I posted one of our blogs, and I can do that again in the chat here, but curious of your take as well, Zach.
Yeah, I saw a presentation, I want to say it was maybe a year ago, where somebody was making the case that like 17 and 18-year-olds don't read email. And all the data that I've seen as of late just smashes that. So if you're of the mindset that prospective students like don't read email or Gen Z doesn't read email or whatever, I think that that's quite frankly, maybe it was true at one point. I don't think it's true any longer. I think in actuality, students, prospective students, and just consumers in general, we are addicted. We are addicted to value, right? And what I mean by that is if anyone's going to exploit a channel, a communication channel that we regularly tap into, it has to be helpful. And I'm not saying, and helpful is not like if you click this button, we'll answer your questions, right? Think about if every single email that you sent, right, offered something wildly different and you sent, 50 emails. Just try that out for maybe it's the segment that is not responding to any of your sort of like traditional comms. take that segment and enroll them in a totally different Conflow, and 50 is a lot, but maybe it's 15 or 20. Send 15 or 20 totally different emails with a totally different offer. An offer could be something as simple as like, hey, we made, check out this quiz, or like, hey, do you find this meme funny or not? Like simple things to see, where do you get reaction? Where do you get response? The hardest thing to tap into from a 17 or 18-year-old is to get them to respond to this kind of communication. And I actually think most of the time it's not because they're not interested, it's just because the value that you're offering is not aligned with what they perceive value to be. There's also this just notion that you're always going to be there, and like the last minute, the last chance, like those, no one believes that anymore. Like, when's the last time you went and you try to buy something from like West Elm or wherever, like where your favorite retailer, and you saw a promotion, or your favorite D2C brand, you're like, hey, I saw this promotion. I know it expired like last month. Any chance I could like buy it right now and still get, have you honor the 20% off? 99% of the time, they're going to say yes to that. And that's just the reality of, that we've all grown up, or many of us have grown up in. And so I think when it comes to younger demographics of students, you have to make sure that the value that you're offering is truly unique, is truly helpful in their eyes. Not helpful because it's going to help you have a better sense of your numbers to give to the dean or whoever. Like, it's got to be super valuable. And I think, you can test so many different things. Just have fun with email. It's in some ways it's totally overused as a channel, but I think from a creative standpoint, it has the most room to be reimagined.
Thanks so much, Zach. And really appreciate you taking the time with us today to share your insights. Really appreciate it. Next up, in 1 minute, we have the next session with Carnegie, Search Differently, Adapting to Landscape Change in Student Search. So pop on over and we'll see you in just a minute. Thanks, Zach. Appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. Take care.